My name is Mandy Cohen. I'm a grad student here at UC Berkeley. I study comparative literature. It's my third year, and I'm a GSI, a grad student instructor. I'm also currently a head steward in our local and running for the position of local recording secretary with academic workers for a Democratic Union.
And what issues that you face that you think are important for yourselves and the public as well?
I think, we're facing huge attacks to public education right now, and that's really been the backdrop for our organizing efforts. So we've seen a lot of cuts to funding in our departments. We've seen pressure to increase class sizes. We've seen increase in living expenses for grad students who are living on very low salaries. I make $16,000 a year.
How do you live on that?
It's difficult. I mean, I pay, more than half of what I make in rent to live in the Bay Area, and that's pretty, that's true across the board for our grad students. So I live frugally. Lots of folks end up taking out loans to get through grad school, even when they're working and teaching to be here. So it's a real struggle. We're lucky to be grad students. We love teaching, but it's definitely not a very privileged life, and we think that the union needs to be sticking up for people in our situations and needs to be advocating for public education and for teachers like ourselves.
So how long have you been involved in the union?
I've been organizing with the union since January of 2010. So in my second year here at Berkeley was when the budget cuts crisis really started, fall of 2009. And I spent that semester organizing with grad students outside of the union because the union was really inactive at that point.
But they were collecting your dues.
They were collecting my dues for sure. But just for example, we had 2 elected officials here at Berkeley campus, whereas our bylaws stipulate we could have 15. So there just was nobody to do union work, even though there were grad students really ready to organize to try and defend public education. We had hundreds of people coming out to meetings and planning protests. So from that kind of semester that was really a transformative experience for us, we realized our union should be the structure supporting and enabling this organizing effort. Nobody else is going to do that for us, so we needed to step up. So ever since about January, grad students who had been activists in the public education movement started to try and organize within the spaces of the union, and then started to realize the difficulties because of the bureaucratic structures, the kind of top-down organizing model, the small number of people who really had knowledge about how the union worked and were trying to hold on to that knowledge, it seemed to us. How difficult.
So it was a kind of a corporate type structure?
It felt like that.
The same structure you're fighting?
Yeah, it's really frustrating when you feel like your union is following models or following the logic of your management. That is a really frustrating moment. I mean, and we went through contract. I'm not just saying this. We went through contract negotiations last semester. We had representatives on our bargaining team who said that our members didn't want a raise. Our members thought a raise would be greedy. That's the kind of thing management says, that a raise is greedy. It should not be your bargaining team representatives.
So that must have made a lot of graduate students very angry.
Yeah, it made us really angry here at Berkeley, and we were struggling through that semester to really do a different kind of organizing model. We were trying to have meetings in departments, which is really the kind of core location for grad students. So we held dozens of meetings across departments to bring together communities of grad students and hear their issues. Everyone we talked to here at Berkeley said, we could really use a raise. And then we would tell this to the statewide bargaining team and hear that, well, they talked to every single member on LA's campus, and nobody there wanted a raise, and they thought it was greedy. So they were ignoring...
So radical Berkeley, huh?
Yeah, poor radical Berkeley. Since then we've met a lot of members at LA, and I think that they would like a raise too. Yeah.
So then you began to get a caucus together in the union?
Yeah, so just about January or February of 2010, as soon as we had gone to our first couple union meetings, we realized that there was really a structural problem in the union that was prohibiting organizing in these serious issues. So we formed the Academic Workers for a Democratic Union. We were very small at that point, maybe 10 or 12 people. We got together, we spent a lot of time just talking about our frustrations trying to work with the union, and really came to the decision early on that the best thing we could do was just to be our unit, to be our union, and to start doing the work. So a number of us, ran for steward positions. We had good people run for campus leadership positions. And we just tried to implement our own organizing models and really kind of enforce democratic structures here. And people responded hugely to that. And kind of since then, the Berkeley unit has been running as a stronger and stronger reform campus, though we still have a huge amount of outreach to do.
How many members do you have on the Berkeley campus?
Let's see, our local represents 12,000 workers UC-wide. Berkeley is about a fifth of that unit. So we have something like 3,000. It's a lot of members and a lot of different situations. It's really a struggle because, people who study in the humanities have really different working conditions and academic conditions than people in engineering schools, professional schools, social sciences. So it's one of the reasons that we really think it's important to have activists in all of these different networks, why we've been emphasizing things like building stewards networks. Because, I'm a literature student. It's hard for me to know what the issues are for chemistry students running labs. It's one of the reasons we really feel like these leadership positions need to be activated here, and that we've been struggling to do over the last year, trying to build that network to understand the different kinds of issues that our members face. This year we have triennial elections for our local, so every 3 years all leadership positions have come open. And, in the course of our contract negotiations, the Reform Caucus spread from Berkeley campus. We already had allies at Santa Cruz, which has been a strong reform campus for a number of years. And the process of how frustrating that contract was, how few members were able to get involved and what a kind of weak contract it was, got us in contact with dissatisfied members around the state at other campuses.
And the internet, you use that?
Sure, we use the internet, but we also actually come together and meet. So it was really exciting. We've had statewide meetings where people drive up from LA, leaving at 5 a.m. to come have 7-hour meetings here at Berkeley and talk about all our issues. So, we have a listserv that we use. We have weekly conference calls, and we try to get together as much as possible because we really believe that collective discussion is how you come up with your best ideas. So we made contact around the state, and we decided that though this reform effort is pretty new, we had to take the opportunity of the elections to at least put out there a reform platform. We didn't have illusions that we would really be able to take over this local in one go, but we knew it was an opportunity to start talking with members and telling them there's a different way that this union can operate. And what's been really incredible is how responsive people are to that message. Yeah, they're really hungry for it, and it really shows that the current leadership is not just a style of organizing that we don't like. It's really an ineffective style of organizing. So we have something like San Diego's campus, where there's a handful of really dedicated reformers and a couple of programs have been managing to tell people about the reform movement. And our guesses of how this vote has turned out is that almost a third of the members at San Diego who voted for the Reform Caucus, from just, the work of maybe 10 or 15 activists there. So it really shows that the people respond to the message and that people really need a different style of union.
Now, March 2nd last year there was a mass protest. Did that kind of vitalize the local?
Yeah, I think March 2nd was one of the first times, I'll speak for Berkeley's campus here, that we had really started to be successful of kind of activating the unit. So that protest, grad students organized from within the unit, and we did it as Berkeley UAW2865, and that felt really powerful because we had been doing it before just as graduate students. So that was one of the first protests where, we came out, we had our T-shirts, we had made our signs, we had speakers there who said, I'm a member of UAW2865, and we had hundreds of members turn out. So it was really exciting to see how these structures can work when they're working for the members, rather than being kind of held away from them.
Now, in this, so you got an election slate together and you put together a caucus. What's the name of the caucus?
So the caucus is Academic Workers for a Democratic Union. We call ourselves AWDU. And the caucus has existed for more than a year, and we've really worked a collective process to first what we did before nominating candidates was we wrote up positions on reform, and we wrote up positions that we want our union to take in the struggle for public education. And that was crucial for us because we wanted this to be about a program of change, not about new faces.
So it's not personalities.
It's not personalities, right? And we knew that we were running as a slate. We're not running as individual candidates. So we came together, we agreed on these statements, and then we found dedicated reform people from around the state. We tried to be representative of different campuses to run and support that slate together.
And what was the role of the International?
Well, we don't have so much communication, surprisingly, here at Berkeley with our international representative. It's a difficult relationship. There's one international rep who's been with our local since its founding. And, the problem with this, it's not about him as an individual. It's about the location of knowledge and power, right? To have all of the institutional knowledge of our local located in one person who's accountable to the international and not the local means that it's really difficult for members to know how to run their union or how to deal with the university. So we've really felt a struggle against this very centralized location of knowledge and power, opposed to the variety of needs and interests of our membership. So But he kind of takes a back seat. He's a very amenable guy, very charming guy. So we're trying our best to work with them. Obviously we want the union to be strong. We hope that's what the International wants as well. So our new leadership will be excited to do something better here. Our election ended on Thursday. Friday the vote count was supposed to happen in LA, which is already interesting since here in Berkeley this is the statewide office. But for some reason they didn't want to count the votes here in Berkeley. So they went down to Los Angeles. There were challenges registered from both of the slates running, so there was some heated conversation Friday evening. They managed to start the vote count. We sent down a lot of supporters when we heard how contentious things were getting, and we heard that they were trying to invalidate all of Berkeley's ballots. We had 819 ballots cast here at Berkeley out of 3,300 ballots cast total. So we heard that, and a bunch of us got in the car and drove down to LA. Saturday actually was a really calm room, a really cooperative room. We had, about 30 people trying to work together to count these 3,300 ballots.
You wanted a fair democratic election.
Yeah, we wanted a fair election. We've been working for that for months, advocating for fair processes that will engage people, where there's, as little possible chance of fraud or mistake as we can have. So we were all there engaged, realizing, it was going to take hours and hours of work, and our elections committee only had 6 or 7 members present. So we all came and said, we're going to help in any way we can. We'll be observers. We had challengers there to help tally the votes. So we counted from 10 a.m. till 5 p.m. on Saturday. We made it through just about every campus except LA and Berkeley. And then the elections committee said we should take an hour break. So we took a break for an hour. We reconvened. We're all sitting in the vote count room thinking okay, 1,500 votes to go. Maybe we can do this tonight. 3 hours later, the elections committee returned and announced to us that they were struggling to keep in session. They didn't think they could maintain quorum. The challenges were just too substantive. And very quickly the chair said, we're moving to certify the votes that have been counted thus far and refer the rest of the ballots and all of the challenges to the Joint Council of the local. This next member seconded, 1 member voted aye, 2 members had no idea what was going on, and then they moved to adjourn. We all erupted, what's going on here? They left the room with our 1,500 uncounted ballots there that would have been invalidated had it not been for the elections committee members from Santa Cruz and Berkeley who stayed in the room.
It must have been
It was a real shock. It was really a shock. We had been thinking what's going to happen here. We'd been trying to do some calculations and realizing that things were really, really close, that we were doing much better than we'd ever thought we could do. So we thought, well, we'll get through these 1,500 votes, and then the challenges are going to be really difficult. It was such a shock to realize that they weren't even going to count the rest of the votes. They just left. So, we were in shock for a few minutes, and then we thought, okay, we have to do everything possible to make sure that the rest of the ballots are not invalidated, that there's no excuse to throw out this election, because we really want it to be counted. So we secured the room, we locked the ballots in a conference room in this office. We videotaped ourselves doing it. We left, we made statements, we started to call the media, we started to call the union. And ever since, members have been sitting in the LA office to monitor those ballots. We drove back up here to Berkeley and started a sit-in here, and we've been demanding that our votes get counted no matter what, and immediately.
And what has been the effect of that?
It's been pretty incredible. All this time we've been getting really personal, really nasty attacks from the slate of the incumbent leadership, trying to blame our slate for the vote count stopping, though our members had been there, working tirelessly to get those votes counted. So, we've just been insisting over and over again, we want the votes counted, we want all the votes counted, we want to hear all the challenges and rule on them. And that's it for us. And we've had a huge outpouring of interest from our members, from the media, labor scholars around the state and around the country have come out in support. I mean, it's a clear-cut issue. This is a democratic process that needs to be seen through. This is not partisan.
Count the votes is not too radical.
Not too radical at all, despite the attempts to make it into a partisan issue. So, we don't know what happened that evening, why the Elections Committee thought that it would work to suspend the count, but the pressure has been overwhelming. The direct pressure from members and from media, from politicians in the state who've come out in support, from around the country. So I think they've had no choice, and they realized that. They finally agreed to resume the count on Thursday morning, which we're overjoyed to hear, though we're determined to stay, to continue our sit-down here in the office until that vote count finishes, because we don't want any more interruptions.
And I mean, the general situation of education in California, there's massive budget cuts. They say they don't have any money. There's massive privatization, private corporations coming onto the campuses, and where's public education going in California?
I mean, what we've seen is that the interest is to privatize education. We've seen a real abandonment of the very idea of public education in the state. That seemed to be the position of the previous state administration, and we haven't seen any commitment from the current governor's administration.
And he's on the Board of Regents.
He's on the Board of Regents, yeah. He's I forget exactly the title, but he's a member of the Board of Regents. So this was one of the struggles for our caucus members during the election even. When our local endorsed Jerry Brown and gave lots of member hours and lots of dues. And, for sure we didn't want Meg Whitman, but we wanted a candidate who was at least talking about a vision for sustaining public education rather than only saying, well, we'll try to minimize the cuts. So we're really advocating for a refusal of austerity measures. We think we have to be talking about new revenue. We have to be talking about the fact that education brings up everybody in the state. It brings people out of poverty. It increases opportunities for communities of color, for minority communities in the state. And we have to recognize that education is the way out of these problems, and it needs to be funded.
And I mean, the university has turned more and more to students from other countries who pay high fees. Mm-hmm. So it's more and more difficult for working class students to get into the University of California.
Right, and it's not about international students. It's also about students from the rest of the country, right? So everybody who's not a California resident has to pay more. And of course, we believe that all of those students have the right to quality education as well. But we have to recognize the mission of the University of California to provide an affordable, excellent higher education to everybody who wants it in this state. And we've come way too far from that goal.
And Scott Walker and what's happening in Wisconsin?
Yeah. I mean, this is, it's a moment when you recognize that our kind of labor, academic labor, is really an up-and-coming force in the labor movement. We're really proud to see the teaching assistants at the University of Wisconsin lead that charge and lead that fight. We really think that the labor movement's got to step back up and say that these rights are not going anywhere. We know that we have labor historians here in the universities. We know the struggles that have gone into winning collective bargaining rights, and no way are we giving them up when we see the kinds of attacks on working people as students and as teachers.
So you're fighting for the public as well as not just your own position.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, one thing that brings all grad students together is our commitment to education, our passion as teachers. So we feel really strongly, and we believe that the teachers in Wisconsin are completely right, that when you fight for the working conditions of teachers, you're fighting for the learning conditions of students. The two go hand in hand.
So how can people support you?
Well, we want to keep the pressure on until this vote count finishes. And then, we really want to see support for public workers of all sorts and all workers, right? Everybody has the right to collective bargaining. We're really tired of seeing our fellow workers here in the UC, seeing their pension benefits attacked. We've been trying to build solidarity with those workers. It's clear to us that, the janitors and the custodians, librarians are not the one causing the crisis around the country. It's the people with the 6-figure salaries, the 7-figure salaries, and we shouldn't get these things confused, who's really to blame for the situation and who are the people who are really working for the good of the public.